chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain and the Blended podcast, as well as founder of the Blended Pledge. And I'm super excited for our show today. We've got Mary from Pallet Alliance coming on and talking all about what you need to know around pallets, but we're also talking about green supply chains. And I know sustainability, but we're gonna give you some insights. We're gonna give you some things to think about. So stick with me. But first, before we talk about what's happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain, I do want to mention the Secret Society of Supply Chain. If you have not gone and checked that out, that is our free membership group. So secretsocietyofsupplychain.com. Go and check that out. It's where all the professionals are networking and connecting. And we've got some events that are happening that people are taking part in. We did Pictionary just a little while ago, and that was a ton of fun just to get everybody together and have a little bit of fun. So secretsocietyofsupplychain.com. We also have Women in Supply Chain Connections, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. And we've got the Supply Chain Marketing Masters Program for marketing professionals in supply chain. All right, so we've got a brand new Woman in Supply Chain episode with Melody. Now, if you haven't heard of Melody, go and check out this episode. You know that my Woman in Supply Chain series is all about the journeys that the women in our industry have taken. What has that looked like? The journey is never a straight line, and they're always taking some twists and turns. They got lots of great advice, and it gives you some insight into what is possible for your career in supply chain as well. So go and check that out wherever you listen to the show. It's episode 470, and I promise you are going to love it. All right, next, where are we going to be? Well, we're going to be at TMSA Elevate. Actually, Madison from my team is going to be at TMSA Elevate. She's got a speaking session there, and we're giving away some of our insights on stage. So don't miss that. If you're going to be there, go and say hi to Madison. What else have we got? So we've got our Women in Supply Chain Connections membership group. If you haven't gone to check it out, go check it out. We do Women in Supply Chain dinners at conferences and locally. I have one happening in Tampa on Thursday night. If you live in Tampa, know anybody living in Tampa, make sure to connect with me because we'd love to have you at that dinner. And then we've got our first virtual meetup happening tomorrow with Katie Date as well. And we can't wait to get to know the connections and the members in our group. All right, what else is happening? I've got a brand new monthly pop. This is my LinkedIn newsletter, and it's talking about the importance of speaking up for ourselves and others. And it talks about a recent experience that I had on the Blended podcast, and it was episode about neurodiversity. And as you can see here in all of the comments, we really kicked off some debate and got people thinking about how we address everybody. So the link is in the comments. If you're over on my personal LinkedIn, we will put that in there after the show. Highly recommend you go and check that out. And now I think it's almost time to bring up our guest. I do want to say today I'm super excited because I'm going to be on site at the One Rail offices, and we are recording a Let's Talk Supply Chain podcast episode in their newly minted studios today. So super excited for that. Stay tuned because I'm going to be in Orlando and we're going to be filming some behind the scenes and things like that. So I can't wait for you to see that. All right, now it is time to bring up Mary. Mary, how you doing?
Good, Sarah. How are you?
I am so excited to have you on the show. I mean, you and I are doing some amazing things. We've got some amazing content coming out. This is the first time that we're having you on Thoughts and Coffee, and we're working together on Blended Pledge. So yeah. I just can't wait for everybody to get to know you. So tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. My name is Mary Casillo. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Development for the Pallet Alliance. So the Pallet Alliance is a large pallet management and procurement company. We work with Fortune 100 to 500 companies that have multi-site manufacturing facilities. And what we do is we help them procure and then manage their pallet category programs. We take a little bit of a different approach than most management companies because we employ some scientists, wood scientists, wood packaging engineers, so on and so forth. Yeah, so we take a really smart approach to the pallet category. You'd be surprised how much there is to know about pallets. It's quite eye-opening.
Well, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the show. I think it might be a little bit eye-opening how much I actually know about pallets, not only to the audience, but maybe a little bit to myself too. And if you're wondering why I've got these glasses on, I'm testing out these Ray-Bans and I'm videotaping my perspective of thoughts and coffee. So we're going to come out with a little bit of that content too, because we're going to see how this goes. We're going to see how this goes. All right, let's get to our poll of the week. So we ask everybody a question every single Wednesday morning across our LinkedIn, our Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn. So the question was, what's the most valuable benefit of supply chain finance? 56% of you said improved cash flow. 22% of you said risk mitigation. 19% of you said supplier stability, and 3% said ESG incentives. Now we had like 169 votes on this one. So everybody, really liked this question and wanted to weigh in on it. Mary, what do you think about this? I know you're into pallets.
Yeah.
But what's your high level overview and thoughts about supply chain finance?
I think supply chain finance is a good thing. Again, I voted on this. The improved cash flow is really important. Not everybody has the same payment terms. The standard payment terms with the Pallet Alliance is net 30. And the reason that is because the Pallet Alliance, we have over 3,500 pallet manufacturing partners across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And, we have agreements with them to pay them pretty quickly. And so if companies, which I've seen net terms of net 365, which is quite large, they offer the supply chain financing option. And with that option, we're able to negotiate quicker payment terms. So, and in order to do that, what that does, it creates that supplier stability, right? Because if we can receive the payments faster, then we can pay the pallet manufacturers.
Absolutely. And I think what is really interesting, and I say this all the time, there's a lot of people in supply chain that don't realize that they're in supply chain. And what you're talking about is one component of supply chain finance. I come from international shipping. And so supply chain finance is more about, original bills of lading. I don't think they use those anymore. But original bills of lading, letters of credit, I'm definitely dating myself, but you know what I'm saying, right? There's a lot of variations of how supply chain finance and people that work within finance that are supply chain adjacent or work within supply chain that don't even realize it. So if you're in finance and you have anything to do with supply chain, we want you in our groups. We want you talking to us, talking to our communities, because it's important that we all sort of come together. So I appreciate that. Now, this is kind of the time of the show where I ask you for a bit of a market update. And I know you told me earlier that you are at ISM World right now. You're in the middle of that conference. You took time to come on this show, which I highly appreciate. But you had, some comments to make, and they kind of aligned with the economist that you heard this morning. So give us a bit of a market update. What are you hearing? What are you talking to people about? What are people thinking?
Yeah. So currently with the pallet market, everything is pretty flat right now. You may see some slight increases in pricing. And I think that's due to the uncertainties of tariffs, right? Everybody's kind of scared. So they're like, oh, let's prepare for it. But I think everything is aligning, even the predictions of what's going to happen is aligning with exactly how the pallet, market works. So the ebbs and flows of the pallet market, when I always do this, one does this, one does that, but currently everything is remaining pretty flat. You're going to see some prices increase a little bit over the summer, but that's usual because over the summer there's usually more demand. The more demand, the more the prices go up.
And so what did the economist share this morning that kind of stuck with you?
So it really stuck with me. This economist is hysterical. He relayed everything. He relayed everything to Denzel Washington movies, and he kept he kept referring to Denzel Washington movies and comparing it to the current market. But what stuck with me is current housing market.
Okay.
So interest rates are having a big impact on the housing market. So nobody is building. And for those who don't know, pallet lumber comes from the runoff of lumber that is used to build houses or furniture. So because no one is building, there's no lumber being ordered. So there's a decrease in lumber. Lumber's needed to build pallets. So it's kind of putting interest rates are putting a strain on the pallet industry as well.
Well, first of all, I mean, who doesn't like a Denzel Washington movie?
Right.
One of my favorites. And so I wish I had been there to really understand what's going on in the market through Denzel Washington movies. But second of all, I don't know if he's come to Florida because they are still building like crazy over here. And so I don't know what part of the country that he's talking about, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of building going on in Florida. And so there could be some runoff from that coming from potentially Florida as well. One of the market updates that I wanted to give, and I wanted to talk about this with our first article as well. I don't know if anybody saw this video, and I paused it really on a weird spot, didn't I?
Great face.
I didn't want it to run through the video. Anyways, this is my video. LinkedIn had asked me sort of what is up and coming for supply chain and what do supply chain professionals and leaders need to be thinking about. And so I created this video about digital product passports. And it wasn't something that they had heard about. I'm not sure if it's something that you have all heard about it while you're watching this, but if you have or you haven't, I'd love to hear a comment in the comments to find out more about who knows about this, who doesn't, who's considering it, who's not. But the digital product passport really is giving people an idea of where, how, what the product is made of. And it's a really interesting concept. So we've put the link in the comments. If you didn't go and check that out, we'll do that on my personal LinkedIn. But just wanted to bring that up as sort of the market update as to where we're going as far as, transparency and resiliency and what we need to be thinking about as retailers, because it's not just for supply chain professionals. It's also for consumers looking to buy product. They want to know where it's coming from, what it's made of, how it came to life, all those kinds of things. And so that is something to look out for. I think it's on the horizon and might be up and coming. I want to give a shout out to Eileen over on my personal LinkedIn. She says, go Sarah and Mary. It's great to see you. All right, let's get to our first article. And actually, I'm not even ready for that. All right, let's get to our first article. And I do want to say hi to Trina. Good morning. She says, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. All right. So our first article is about how to achieve a green supply chain in uncertain times. Now, this is from April, so it's a couple of months old. But I think it's still very, very relevant. And it kind of goes with what I was talking about with those digital product passports. What are the different ways that we're creating positive change that doesn't have that heavy weight, maybe of sustainability or ESG or reporting? Because a lot of that is coming down too. And I feel like there's a lot of weight in the industry about keeping up with regulations and reporting and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot in this particular article. But what I thought was, they said governments are shifting away from sustainability and social impact. But the interesting part of that is that it gives organizations an opportunity to create positive change, like I just mentioned. Mary, what did you think of this article? I've got a few other things to mention, but I want to hear from you and what you thought about this. And if anybody is loving this conversation or you want to comment, put a fire emoji in the comments or ask us a question. We'd love to hear from you. All right, Mary, what do you think about this particular article?
Yeah, I thought this was a great article. I really believe that companies are getting this opportunity, to enhance their brand recognition by doing the right thing. You know, in sustainability, there are some people who don't understand it. There's some people that, that what's not involved. It's not just environmental. It's
No.
about the transparency, what's going on, what are you doing, how are you doing it? And if that information happens to be really good information, then your consumer base grows. Yeah. So this article really, really hit hey, it's about total value. It's about, in the supply chain, right? It's about total cost of ownership. You take a holistic approach let's take pallets, for example. Pallet Alliance takes a holistic approach to how they actually enhance and make pallet programs more sustainable. So they take everything into consideration. How are you receiving these pallets in your organization? How are these pallets interacting with your machinery? What type of conveyor system do you have? Are you using the right pallet? Are you seeing instances where pallets are getting stuck, in your supply chain? Downtime equals, one, it costs you money, and two, you're not getting the product out the door for your customers. It could cause delays, so on and so forth. So I think taking a holistic approach, including all of that and fixing some, the way people do things, making it more efficient, becoming more efficient, it has a positive impact on the entire supply chain.
Yeah. What are the things? What are the little things that we can sort of do and tweak? But also, it's about partnering with the right suppliers that
Yes.
have the same values and align with the same values, so that you're not pushing up against sort of a brick wall every time you want to make a change or get information or things like that. It should be seamless, right? It should be easy if you're working with the right suppliers. Now, one thing I want to mention, I'm doing a lot of work. I haven't been very public about it, but I'm doing a lot of work in anti-slavery and human trafficking. And so I want to put a call out there, because I'm looking to put together a focus group, and I'm looking for some chief sustainability officers and some heads of procurement in Europe. So if you're interested in participating in the focus group, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or if you know somebody, let them know about it. We want to do this fairly soon, and we want to get some information more about like reporting, or why don't you report, or things like that. So if you know anybody, I'd love to hear that. But again, when you talk about transparency, they're talking about, we want to know who, where, how of products. That's what I was talking about with the digital product passport. But what it does is it helps organizations, it helps supply chain professionals make choices that align with their values. And that's what I was talking about with suppliers, right? You want to be aligning with the right people and the suppliers that are align with your values, because essentially, this comes down to transparency, responsibility, and trust. And you have to be able to trust within the organization, but you have to be able to trust on the outside of the organization as well.
Absolutely. Yep. So even aligning with the right suppliers that have the capabilities to meet your expectations. And in doing so, what you're doing is you're enhancing your process, because they're doing the right things, using the right product, giving you that information of what they're using, even discussing how it's built. What are the CO2 emissions that are involved with that? They're reporting that to you, but they're also aligned with what your goals are. So that's one of our goals, is to connect these manufacturing facilities with the right provider that has the capabilities to meet what they need in order to avoid all of the issues that come along with not having the right supplier.
Yeah, so true. And you mentioned it earlier, like sustainability isn't just about the environment. They're kind of talking about it being ESG reporting. So it's environment, labor, employee welfare, corporate governance. Like, that's all of what's really considered. Sometimes we get blinded by the word sustainability, but really it's about all of those things together. And that's why one of the reasons why I'm doing a bunch of work in anti-slavery and human trafficking is because supply chain is one of the biggest drivers of that, to be honest. Merlinda, I want to give you a shout out because you gave us 3 fire emojis. So she's loving the conversation. Make sure you do your own and comment some fire emojis. Want to hear from you. All right. So let's get to our second article. And this is about RFPs. Now,
Yeah.
I feel like I've been talking about RFPs for my whole career. Because in logistics, RFPs were completely rampant, right? You know, you send an RFP, it's got all of the lanes that you have, it's got all of the modes. And let me tell you, those things took like 3 weeks, at least 3 weeks to a month to try to like fill out. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for the vendor. So talk to me about this, because this is an article that you guys wrote as Pallet Alliance. You talk about the pros and cons. I kind of want to hear about where RFPs fall short, because I think that's the most interesting part of this. So talk to me about this.
So one thing that Pallet Alliance really sees a lot with RFPs, you're just very price focused, right? Mm-hmm. Customers are price focused, and they forget about the added value. So yes, RFPs, you can, they have clearly defined parameters, equal opportunity for all the participants. But one of the biggest problems that we see is that these organizations will create these RFPs, and when they send them to us, we're looking at the information. Again, we have scientists on our staff.
Oh, that's true.
So they're looking at this information, and they're looking at these, specification drawings, and you look at the bottom of the specification, drawn in 1993. Whoa. Okay. So, all right. So your specifications, they're out of date. Are you still using this pallet? Oh man, this one location says it has 335 different SKUs, different specifications that they use. Are you still using all of these pallets? Your documentation is saying 0 for annual volume. Do you still want us to quote on this? Doesn't make any sense. So a lot of the times Pallet Alliance likes to inform organizations that, you know what, a pallet RFQ, specifically the one you've shared with us, is lacking this information, this information, this information, this information. And what we strongly believe in is doing, ourselves taking a look at each and every single one of your locations and actually doing an audit and explaining, hey, you're missing all of this information, and all of this information ties into the rest of your supply chain, because I'm sure you're seeing quality issues. I'm sure you're seeing, I'm sure your customers are complaining about the pallets that you're sending them, and they're giving you fees because your pallets aren't in the best condition. Right. So there are so many things that tie into what the pallet does for companies in the supply. Pallets move the world. Right? You wouldn't get anything if it didn't come here on a pallet. So, it's really finding those partners that are going to point these things out to you. And they're going to say, hey, perhaps this avenue is the best avenue for you to take to avoid the issues you talked about. Hey, we visited your site. We measured that pallet. That pallet is not the specification you provided us. How are you quoting apples to apples with that? It's just, you can't allow everyone to have a fair chance if nobody's quoting apples to apples.
Well, and if you don't understand necessarily, because when you're sending out RFPs, you're not necessarily, the pallet expert. To be able to know what you don't know. And I think part of what you talk about in this article is the supply chain risk exposure that you have with an RFP, not quite understanding the RFP and not understanding what you don't know or what you're missing out. And I think with that, you might be leaving money on the table. So if the RFP and you send it back and you're at $14 a pallet and somebody else is at $12 a pallet, okay. But then are you potentially housing some pallets in one location that you potentially don't need, that need to go back into rotation, that can be recycled, which means that potentially you can get some of that money back. I don't know. I don't really know how that works. But I'm just sort of thinking out loud in the fact that there's a bunch of money that's being left on the table. Trent says, how to address the incumbent not meeting the spec that they set out in the RFP? Ooh, that's a good question, Mary.
Such a good question. That is such a good question, because how do you address the incumbent? The customer's responsibility is to inform the incumbent. This is something they don't do, right? They'll take the specification they've had on file for 10 years, and they're like, because they're in procurement, they're not category experts. They can think that they are category experts, but they're taking outdated information and they're sending it out. And then if the incumbent supplier is selling them this pallet for $10 and we come back with a price from that old specification that's $14, no way does that give anybody any opportunity to compete. But it is the responsibility of the customer to make sure that they are informing their incumbent supplier that they are putting something out to bid. That is full transparency. That is partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and making sure that you've got the right information, right, before you're sending out the RFPs. Sometimes it's easy just to send out the same RFP that you sent out last year, but at the end of the day, a lot can change within 12 months. I mean, we've all seen it. There's lots of disruption. And I know we need to get to our last article here, but it's interesting because I'm seeing RFPs in digital media and, marketing, and I've never really kind of seen that before. And for me, when I see something like that, you fall short on the value and what the ROI and the benefits are, because you're not really seeing that. You're really just breaking it down to cost. And I think there's so much more to be seen. But like Susan said, they're a bit of a necessary evil. People are going to use them, but maybe it's now time for us to sort of revamp that. And maybe, Mary, you and I have a new business idea.
Absolutely. So instead of the RFP, it needs to be the RFV. It's a request for value.
Okay. I love that. Go ahead.
How are you going to add value to my current product, my current process? How is your organization, they do RFIs, right? Requests for information before they do that, but they're asking these silly questions that are like, what year did you guys open? Like they're asking, what does that have to do with our value? I mean, if you're a long-standing organization and you've been doing it for 30 years, which Pallet Alliance has been, that stands out. We're been successful. But how does that help you decide if we're the right company for you? You need to know what we do. You need to know our capabilities. You need to how about case studies? See our case studies. We've had a customer for 25 years. And we continuously improve their process and have continuously saved them millions of dollars
on a yearly basis.
25 years.
And so do you really get value in a relationship out of RFPs? Maybe that's the better question. And then if anybody wants to know how to do an RFV, reach out to Mary on LinkedIn.
That's right.
And I'm sure she will help you put one of those together. All right, really quickly, because we only have a couple minutes left. I do want to bring this up because these were 3 key predictions for the US pallet market. If you don't think that it's going to affect you, think again. Go and read this particular article, because what they're saying is there's excess inventory with a lot of retailers due to the tariffs, because they're trying to bring in product before the tariffs, which means that a lot of pallets are then in storage because we're storaging. We're keeping the excess inventory on pallets, which means the pallets are not cycling through the supply chains. And so when that happens and they're not in circulation, it could result in higher prices. But one of the things that stood out for me too, that I didn't realize, is that labor wages make 10 to 20% of the cost of a pallet. And because we have some labor shortages on the warehousing side, et cetera, there's not a lot of people working in pallets. And so that cost could go up too. What final thoughts on that, Mary? You've got about 45 seconds.
45 seconds. You are absolutely correct with pallets being stuck in warehouses. They're not in the circulation. So that means people may have to start building new pallets. Therefore, the prices will go up. When it comes to labor, pallet manufacturers and their employees are the hardest working individuals I have seen in action. And, a lot of them rely on immigration. And with the new immigration policies, it's becoming very hard, and there's a lot of hiring issues. So then at that point, the pallet industry is also, I think, 15% below wages. So they have to increase the wages. Therefore, that impacts the price of a pallet. So
Yeah.
With all these struggles and uncertainties, you may see price increases. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard work. People don't actually realize. So my husband ran a pallet warehouse for a number of years, and there's people behind the scenes painting those pallets, repairing those pallets, and it's a lot of intense, hard work and hard labor. And so I just wanted to put it out there and thank all the people in the background who are fixing those pallets and making sure
Absolutely.
that our
Thank
products
you,
can
pallet
move
manufacturers.
around the world, right? Because that's what you said,
Yeah.
is that pallets move products around the world. Well, thank
Yes.
you so much to everybody who came and commented and was part of the show today. We really, really appreciate it. Hillary, I see the comment, but we're not going to be able to get to it. Maybe Mary can reach out to you a little bit, a little bit later. Mary, thanks so much for taking time out of your conference schedule to join us on the show.
Yeah,
and we're going to have an episode with Pallet Alliance on the podcast very, very soon, so you can learn a little bit more about who they are and what they do. But before that, make sure you head over to their website. All right, everybody. I will see you next Tuesday. Thank you.
Take care.